This evening, for regeneration sanctification, we will learn about God's true work. Even on this day, on this earth, there are millions and billions of people who are saying that they are going to do God's work, and they are running back and forth with bags. And there are millions of clergymen and also millions of Christians. And yet, there are two types of people who do God's work. On one side, you have those who devote their money and time, and they carry their bags around, establishing churches and schools. And they will work to death, and they can't even go to heaven, and they instead will be judged and die. On the other hand, you have those who do not do God's work at all, but instead they'll go to heaven. Then, what kind of work do you want to do? Yes, you want to do the latter. Yes, you want to be those who can not do anything and just go to heaven. They're those who will donate their money, their life to the end and make such great efforts to establish schools, hospitals, churches, and hold evangelistic meetings for their whole life. In the end, they cannot go to heaven and they will just be judged. And they will die. On the other hand, there are those who don't do anything like that. They just play and they go to heaven. One day, after listening to Jesus' sermons, his disciples became so filled with desire to work. So they wanted to do God's work. So they went to Jesus and they asked him, John chapter 6 verse 28 and 29. Then they said to him, "What shall we do that we maybe do the works of God?" The disciples had rolled up their sleeves and said, What is it that we can do? That we can do God's work. We really want to do God's work before we go. Everyone had rolled up their sleeves, willing to work. So what did Jesus say? Let's read his answer. "This is the work of God, that you believe in him who he sent." They were filled with loyalty and enthusiasm, and they even rolled up their sleeves. And they said to Jesus, "What can we do to do the work of God?" So he looked at them, and he said, "God's work?" Disciples thought that said, "Oh, you must spread billions of pamphlets. You must establish 20, 50 churches. You must hold 100, more than 100 evangelistic meetings." But instead, they looked at him and said, "God's work? All you have to do is believe in the man whom God has sent. And that is his work." They couldn't believe it. I'm sure all of you are the same. Do you have an urge? Do you feel an urge to do God's work? But God's work is to believe in him whom he sent. To believe in him who he sent means to follow him. And to follow him means to live his life. And to live his life means to have his character. In other words, to have the exact character of Jesus is the true work of God. Other than that, without the character of Jesus, and you go around preaching and establishing churches, hospitals, and schools, it's just defiling Jesus' face and God's face and preventing them from going to them. And they can't be saved, I won't be saved, and you just become a worker for hell. So I just want you to write this down. It's one line. Please write this down. The work that the Lord accepts
받아주시는 사업은
is the work that reflects His character.
풍성을 반사하는 사업뿐이다.
This is the only work. The only work that the Lord accepts is the work that reflects His character. It's not to spread many pamphlets or hold evangelistic meetings. It's not to donate lots of money and build a huge church, expensive church. Not even graduate from theological school. It's all useless. If there's only one Christian, one pastor who has the image of Jesus, that person is doing God's work.
인간에게 맡겨주신 사업 중에 품성을
The only those
사업은 없다.
no higher work was ever committed to mortals than the shaping of character. There's no higher work than the transformation of our character. Our first duty to God and to our fellow beings is self-improvement, is a transformation of our character. Do you want to work for God and for man, for your fellow man? Then you must first be changed into the image of His Son. That's the only work that He accepts. In a certain neighborhood, there was a deaconess. And when it's spring or fall, there is a revival meeting, and she used to go around spreading pamphlets. And she will tell people, "Oh, you must believe in Jesus. Come to church." And once they get the pamphlet, they say, "Oh, I'm not going to church because of that person." When you ask them why, they say, "You know that person? All year long, she goes around fighting with everyone. And then when it comes time for those meetings, she tells people to believe in Jesus." Were we not also the same? We must evangelize with our lives. Not just when it's time for revival meetings or evangelistic meetings. Even if that kind of person does not spread pamphlets, if they live the life of Jesus regularly, then they would come to her and say, "I want to go to your church," and they will follow her. This is the true work. There's no need to go around spreading pamphlets. We must spread the pamphlets of our lives. And so it's written here. All those who spread the truth will not save themselves by spreading the truth. You know, giving lots of sermons doesn't mean you'll be saved. Actually, it was religious leaders who fell from salvation. All those who spread the truth will not save themselves by spreading the truth. Depart, depart, go out from there. Touch no unclean, go out from the midst of her. Be clean, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. So before you spread the truth and evangelize, you must first be transformed and live the life of Jesus. There will be a fearful curse for those who spread the truth but are not sanctified. There will be a fearful curse. There will also be a fearful curse. So those who do not live according to the words that they speak will receive a fearful curse. So there will be a fearful curse upon those who first spread the truth but are not sanctified. Unsanctified workers and evangelists. There will also be a fearful curse upon those church organizations and theologicals who allow those unsanctified workers to continue work in word and service. Do you know why this world is in ruin? Because of those unsanctified workers and evangelists. They give diplomas to all those young students, preachers and evangelists, and they are unsanctified. And that's why our God and our Jesus receive misunderstandings and they are cursed and defiled. Yeah, nowadays, a diploma is everything. And if you don't have a diploma, they don't even allow you to preach. And they don't even consider what you teach the gospel. You can't even go anywhere and preach. No matter how much you're filled with the Holy Spirit and prepared by God, they ask you, "What theological school did you come out of?" And if you say, "I didn't," then they don't treat you well. A diploma is everything nowadays. If the religion we profess fails to renew our hearts and sanctify our lives, how can it exert a saving power upon others? How can there be power when we ourselves have not been changed? If the Jesus I believe in has not changed me, how can it change anyone else? A while ago, I went to Seoul to visit a university professor. And afterwards, when it was time for me to leave, they said that they would get me a taxi. And it was Daebangdong in Seoul. So they ran out to get a taxi for me. It's about 10 minutes from where I was to the bus terminal. So when I got into the taxi, I was surprised to see that there was an elderly man driving. You know, driving a small car is more tiring. It's less tiring to drive a bigger car, but this taxi was very small, and it makes people very tired when they drive. So I felt so sorry for her. I said, how is that you became a driver? A taxi driver. I asked him, how old are you? He said, I'm 62. So I started explaining to him about health laws, how to keep himself healthy. Since you're driving such a small car, you should, how do you eat? You have to eat like this, and you should, do this so that your fatigue will be taken away. And the professor I had visited had given me some tangerines, but I gave it to him and said, here, eat this later. So he kept on looking at me. He asked me, are you a pastor or layman? Oh, look at me. I always wear a jacket. I'm just a layman. Oh, really? I'd just like to say something frankly. Oh, go ahead. Oh, it doesn't sound very good. No, it's okay. It's not good though. It's okay. So finally, after delaying, he says, my father passed away a while ago. He was 93. And my real mother died earlier. So my father married again. And now he died. And he attended church before he passed away. And so pastors and elders and all these church members came to hold the funeral. And he paid for all the funeral services. And afterwards, when the pastors returned home, he gave $300 in gratitude. But for some reason, this pastor became upset. And he told the mother-in-law, the stepmother, even if you go to an elderly home, do not live with that stepson. And the pastor separated them. And later they said, oh, we need to make new curtains for our pastor. Pay $1,000. I must go on a trip. Give me some money. And this pastor would start taking away this stepmother's money. So this man's daughter, in other words, her stepdaughter-in-law, said, the church should bring parents and children together. Why are they separating us? And she became mad. I'm going to go to the church. So he said, no, be quiet. Because the father had an inheritance to give. And so he said, dear, if you say that, then they think that we want the inheritance. Because he's the only son. But the church has separated the son and the stepmother and is taking the money. They'll think that we want the inheritance. So don't say one word. And after, when she runs out of money and she has nowhere to go, where can she go? We're the only ones. So at the time, let's accept her. So he prevented his wife from saying anything. And he was telling me frankly, he lived in North Korea when he was young, and at the time he attended this missionary school. Now his father's passed away. He is old, and now he made up his mind to go back to God. But when he saw what was going on in the churches, he said he made up his mind to never go back to church. And so he made up his mind to just end his life driving the taxi. And when I heard that, I really felt pain. There are a lot of people like that in this world. I can't even mention how many people are like that in this world. In the country of India, there are right now 7 billion people. And he loved the Bible, and he read the whole Bible. And later, he said that it is a fatal sin for India to reject the Bible. And the people of India must read the Bible. And he began to love Jesus. He loved Jesus, and he wanted to become a Christian and give up his life and receive baptism and be baptized. And he made up his mind, but before he received his baptism, he looked at the Christian leaders around the world. And as he looked, he saw how abominable they were. And he realized it would be shame that he also would be a Christian. So he made up his mind not to be a Christian. And he gave up. And before he died, he said, I love Jesus and I love the Bible. And so I was going to make myself a Christian for life. But as I saw the Christian world, I made up my mind not to become a Christian. And he died. And so right now in India, there's so many people who are starving to death. And their God is a cow. And yet they're only trampled upon by this cow God. And they're all dying. Do you know who killed those people of India? It was those degenerated Christians. All throughout history. Who ruined this earth? It was not Gentiles, but it was the fallen churches. And it was the Christians. And it was the Christians and fallen churches that killed the Son of God. It was not Buddhists or atheists. It was they that killed Jesus. It was they that killed John the Baptist. And it was they that killed Elijah. If Gandhi, he was considered the father in India. If he had become a Christian, then how many of the children of India, how many of God's children would be saved? On that day when I met that taxi driver, I met another Gandhi. And it really hurt me inside. I wanted to kneel and beg for forgiveness for the Christian world. So I told him. And so he thought that I would say, oh, how can you say that? Don't be like that. But instead, I said like this. I said, sir, I'm really sorry. You know, nowadays, all the churches are deceivers. So you really made a good decision not to go to church. You know, when you were young and you went to missionary school in North Korea, what did you learn? What does the Bible say? When you pray, it doesn't say go to church, but pray in your room. So buy a Bible and study the Bible and obey it as you did when you were young. And I hope that you will pray in your room and walk with God. And all of a sudden, he smiled. You know, he made up his mind to die, driving as a taxi driver. And finally, there was a way of escape. Oh, really? And now there's a way for him to live. And he was very happy. And at the time I said, I said to him, I'm traveling around fighting against the fallen Christian world. That's why I'd like to tell you about the God which I serve. And he said, if it's a God that you serve, then I want to learn about him. And with a very earnest heart, he asked me, so can you please give me your address? So with one hand, he's driving, and the other hand, he wrote his address. He has very good handwriting. So when I returned home, I sent him Key to Happiness book. And later I moved very shortly after, so I never got to receive an answer from him. But I wonder how happy he is receiving this book and being able to walk with God alone. You know, that which our Father and Jesus asked is not for us to set up a big church and have a lot of church members. Our Father and Jesus only wants one person who reflects His image. And that kind of person will have the power to save the whole world. So those who live
예수님의 생애를 하면
the life of Jesus and have His image, do not have to tell anyone to come out to church.